All right, guys, we are back with another episode of Post Hunt Clarity. On tonight's episode, we're going to be kind of doing an early season recap for you guys. Gabe just went on a hunting trip. He's been out hunting in northern Wisconsin for opening weekend as well. I've been out hunting a couple times in Kentucky, so we're going to be kind of recapping the early stages of our 2024 hunting season. So, Gabe, how's
It's
your
been
trip?
inter-
I guess we'll start there. Or
it's
anything else you want to share?
yeah, it's been interesting. So the last podcast we did, we were talking about Spoon and Crockpot Club, what we think is wrong with Boone and Crockett's scoring system. It's just how people score deer. Ironically, seasons have been open in multiple states for a couple different weeks, and I'm already seeing the same thing online. Guys sitting there like, oh, I shot this nice 150 and it's literally like a 120-inch deer. And you scroll through the comments and people are just like roasting the absolute shit out of this guy. And it kind of feel bad, you just sit back and watch from the sidelines. And then there's, other people that, I saw a lot in the Wisconsin bow hunter page of bucks that were killed this week that were just year and a half year olds, which again, more power to you. If you want to fill your tag. But almost all of the posts where it was like a fork or a basket or a smaller deer are all like, well, it's not the biggest, but I got meat in the freezer or something along the lines. Like if you ask AI to regenerate that phrase and turn it into something similar, that's the Facebook feed was like. Just a bunch of guys shooting small bucks that are like, I want to post it online, but I don't want to get necessarily, ridiculed or roasted. So I got to start my post off by, you know, um, not the biggest deer, but I'm happy with it. Like, dude, just
Well, my philosophy for that is always I've always said this is if you're gonna shoot a buck and you feel like you have to justify it, like shoot what makes you happy. And if that's a little buck, if that's a year and a half old, whatever, fine. But if you feel like you need to justify it, but you're like, oh, I've got meat in the freezer, just shoot a freaking doe. Like,
yeah.
why are you shooting a buck? Like,
No,
it just if you want to hunt for the meat, you can buy as many bonus tags as you need. Like, just shoot does. You know
yeah.
what I mean?
If you live in a southern part of the state, you should be able to shoot as many does as you want. Up north, it's a little bit different
Oh, I
story.
forget that just I forget they changed that now. Yeah,
Yeah, they just canned a bunch of the tags up here, which is a good thing. But
for sure it is. But
aside from that, let's hop back to after that podcast. I was talking about me shooting my bow, a bunch of other stuff, and I was going into the season with as low of confidence as I could possibly have, which is not good when you're planning a hunt that took you 3 years to draw a tag. You got to drive 12 hours to go hunt, and you're going to go hunt for a week. Like, it's almost a red flag, but with my personality, I'm like, I fucking took off. I'm going, this is what's going to, happen. And in the last 2 days before the trip, like I dialed it back and I'm like, I'm confident shooting out to 60 yards. Like ideally I want to shoot 50 and in, but if I have to shoot 60, I'm going to shoot because I'm confident.
mm-hmm.
So Dad and I leave for that trip early Thursday morning. We drive, it ended up probably only being 11 hours, but we made pretty good time. Showed up, we got out there by like 5:30 to the landowner's house. Drive down the long driveway, knock on the door. I'm excited to meet this gal. On her, like following that driveway, there was a semi truck and a diesel truck in front of us that turned into, it's an airplane hangar. I guess I'll just say that. Turned there. I stayed straight and went to this landowner's house, knocked on the door. All the lights were on. The door was like swinging open, kind of like eerie type thing, but they're in the middle of nowhere. Maybe that's just how they roll. Like giant ranch house, log cabin style, beautiful. Probably like a 4,000, 5,000 square foot home, just awesome with a great view. And nobody answered, right? So I'm like, okay. I knocked again and I waited on the porch for like 2 minutes. And at that point, it's like, well, it's almost awkward now because like I don't want him to see me just standing out here. So I'm like, whatever. Like, we don't have to meet them on the first day. The last phone call I had said we were good to go. Stop by. I might be there. I might not. So took it as, okay, they're not there, even though there was two vehicles in the driveway. So we went back down the driveway and then pulled into where that semi truck and diesel truck had pulled in, thinking, okay, might be, relatives of the landowner. So I pulled in and they were unloading corn or I guess it wasn't corn, maybe it was just the oats that they had harvested, into a giant grain bin. Two guys. I went out there and, it was super loud. And I'm like, hey, do insert landowner's name here, if they're home. And he's like, oh, you must be Gabe. Yeah, we were expecting you. I'm just one of the ranch hands. So, I'll let you talk to, landowner's son. He's here too. So he waved at me and then he's like, hey, we'll be done in about 10 minutes. I'll come talk to you then. But he was a little intimidating at first, the way he sounded. I'm like, oh, like he doesn't sound like he's happy to see me type deal. They finished unloading the grain bin. He came over, he took off his hat just like it was the end of an 18-hole match, smiled at me and shook my hand and was like, hey, Gabe, I heard a lot about you. Glad to have you out here. Long drive coming from Michigan. I'm like, nope, coming from Wisconsin. He's like, so a couple hours shorter, but still a long drive. He's like, yeah, landowner, insert landowner's name there, was filling me in, about you guys coming. More than happy to have you guys here. It was me and my dad. And he's like, hop in my truck. I'll give you a tour of all the properties. So we literally hopped in his truck and he was taking us through the fields, showing us the awesome views, telling us, the history of his family and the land, talking about, Theodore Roosevelt was friends with his great, or his grandfather, I guess. And they went on hunts together on that piece of property back in the early 1900s. And it was just like a super cool experience that some stranger literally 45 minutes ago, had never met, never talked to, invites us into his truck, takes us around, telling us where he's seen deer in the past. We're driving through the fields, pheasants flying everywhere. He's telling us a story about they grew up poor, when he was just a young kid. So all they did was shoot deer to eat venison and survive off venison. So I was like, you're telling me that with all these deer, you have on your property, you don't deer hunt anymore? He's like, no, I'm so sick of venison. I never want to eat another deer again. He's like, none of us hunt deer. He's like, but coyotes though, I'll sit out, at night with thermals and shoot coyotes. Oh, I love that, but he's the, likes to fly his airplanes. He does all the crop farming and his brother does all the livestock farming. So they kind of split those job roles. Not a huge ice fisherman or anything like that, but he's an outdoorsman, and he films deer, off his porch, and he's got binoculars. So he's like very, and this is where this is different for me. Most landowners I've ever had permission from don't hunt like at all, and almost know like very little about what hunting's about, why we do it, all that stuff. Like this guy was honestly really good because he knew exactly why I was out there. Like he asked me, he's like, you guys can be blind hunting, you guys can be spot and stalking, like knew all the terminology, all the super familiar with everything, and still like let me come out there. We never paid these guys anything. It was literally just a letter in the mail, being a genuine person. So starts the hunt. Season doesn't open until Friday at noon. He drops us back at Dad's truck by like 7 o'clock or 7:30. There's still an hour and a half of daylight, which is perfect. So Dad and I can drive around and start glassing. Immediately that night, like we're seeing bucks, whether it was on their private or the public, like there's deer all over, mix of whitetails, muleys, seeing some decent bucks, not necessarily giants, but some good bucks, that I'm like, okay, I'd be happy shooting this deer, but I still want to wait, try and find something bigger. Set up camp, blah, blah, blah. Next morning, wake up, it's the same thing. So you spend that morning, you can't hunt until noon. Ideally, the goal is to find a deer up on their feet in the morning, try and watch them, into a bedding spot. So at noon, you can go out after them. Well, at 9:30 a.m., right off their driveway, I filmed a fork buck and what I would consider a 150s mule deer, a pretty good buck, full velvet, like bedded 50 yards from the road. I'm like, oh, dude, this is money. So we sat there 50 yards from this deer in the truck filming him, and they didn't give a single shit that we were sitting there watching. Whitetails, you stop like that. Majority of the time, those deer will take off and, run a country mile away from you. The mule deer out there didn't care. They're not really used to being hunted. They're used to lots of vehicle traffic, lots of truck traffic, stuff like that. So it's just another day for them. The only issue was it was 9:30 and I wasn't going to sit there for 3 hours, 3.5 hours, waiting for season to open. My bow was back at camp, clothes back at camp. So Dad and I left, drove back to camp, and I practiced shooting my bow, got ready, and then as soon as noon hit, I'm like, okay, let's go back. So instead of going to hunt right away, I went and did a drive-by in the same spot just to see if he was there. Deer gone. So already off the bat, I'm like, shit, like, where are we going to find these deer? Now, this is different type of terrain than what I've hunted for mule deer in Nebraska. In Nebraska, it's less sage, less trees, more what you would call like deep cuts, right? So it's like washouts, drainages, cuts, whatever you want to call it, that are, maybe 40, 50 yards wide, but they drop down in elevation 40, 50 feet, so they'll have almost cliffs or like dirt, bluff, butte type stuff where deer will bed in the shade, you know, um, underneath those hills. Well, this was different. This is more bigger open country with, I mean, there's still elevation changes. Like there's still 200 feet in elevation in some of these cuts, but they're big cuts. Like some of these cuts are, 200 yards wide. So it's not great for stalking conditions. It's almost like rolling hills. So we drove by, didn't see the deer, and I'm like, all right, let's play the wind, go up and around, and then just slowly start picking these sage patches and cuts apart. So we start picking apart like our route to where I think the deer are bedded. You pull up Onyx, and I'm like, okay, in this cut, there's a few patches of sage that the deer could crawl in, and I'm assuming they're in one of these. Issue is some of these patches of sage are like 30 to 50 yards in diameter. Like you got to think circles, but like you can't really see into it because of the leaves. Like it's so thick. The stuff's only like 7 feet tall. Like you got to think it's like in all their patch. You really can't see into it. So at this point, we're walking. I'm like, well, if there's anything here, we're gonna kick it up and maybe jump shoot it. Slowly, methodically, picked these apart. Didn't find any of the deer. Went and got into that cut. About 100 yards from where we last saw that buck. Peeked over the hill and we sat in glass for like an hour and a half. We're sitting there baking in the sun. It's now 80, 82 degrees out. It's like 2 in the afternoon. Looking at this pile of sage, and I'm like, well, the longer we sit here, there's a chance that there's a deer. Maybe we'll get up, stretch their legs. So we sat there, and then I could tell my dad was getting baked in the sun. I was kind of getting baked in the sun, and we talked, and we're like, we have 7 hours left of shooting light. Like we're either gonna sit here for 6 more hours before the deer move and get exhausted, or we'll go back to camp and just try and find this deer tonight. So that's what we did. We left. Didn't know where the deer were, but we didn't kick anything up. Like if you were to kick a deer up, you'd see it run just with the terrain. Never kicked anything up. So I'm like, they're either in that patch or they're further up the cut. Still undecided on where they were. Because this fast forward to that evening, we're driving around and like we look at that cut and it's 7 o'clock, didn't see any deer. I'm like, okay, maybe they're just gone. Kept driving around. We saw some other deer, on the public. Got out and had a chance at one buck that was right on the fence line between public and private. We couldn't hunt. Honestly, probably fortunately, he was on the private side, so we popped up over an oil field rig, and he was at like 40 yards. But it was also a deer that was between 130 and 140 probably as a mule deer. And I'm like, even if he was on public, I don't think I want to shoot that deer. So it was a good opportunity type deal. And eventually he hopped the fence on the public, and it was probably 70 or so yards. And he sat there and just stared at us. I'm like, I could have drew back and just shot him multiple different times. But again, didn't want to shoot that far. Didn't necessarily want to harvest that buck. So then we went and did some more glassing. At that point, it's like 8 o'clock. I'm like, all right, let's drive back up their driveway and see if deer are there. We slow down as we're dropping into the cut on the driveway where those deer were earlier. I pass and I see like 5 bodies of deer, just below where Dad and I had set up at noon, or 12:30 by the time we got there. Like it would have been a 20-yard shot to those deer. I'm like, there's a bunch of deer. Let's pull up where they can't see us, be quiet, get out, gently shut the doors. And now I'm playing the wind. The wind is perfect. It's in my face. Deer, to the north of me, the wind's out of the northwest right now. Money. Literally 80 yards. We crossed a cattle fence, and we still had a hill for terrain. Crawl up on top of that hill, and there's the prairie grass is anywhere from 1.5 feet to maybe 3 feet tall in spots, so you can lay down and kind of have some cover. So that's what we did. We crawl. I kind of belly crawl. I peek up, and I'm like, oh shit! Like there's a giant buck. There's another giant buck. There's a fork buck, and there's like 2 does and 4 fawns or whatever. Like there's numerous eyeballs down there just sitting in the grass feeding. They're in the shade. Thermals were pulling down that way. Luckily, the wind was in my face, and it was also a chop off behind me. So I'm like great on scent. I ranged the one deer because I have those Fury binoculars. So I'm looking at him in the binocs, ranging the furthest buck, which was like probably a 160s buck. He was awesome 4x4, super tall, not very wide. And he was at 83 when I first ranged him. I'm like, too far. Fortunately, the biggest buck that was out there, super wide. I'm guessing I'd sent it to a picture of my buddy because we got awesome film. Well, Dad got semi awesome film. I'll get to this story anyways. And my buddy was like, that's definitely, over 160s. He's like, I can't quite tell. He's like, it could be 70s, it could be an 80s buck. So of that caliber, awesome mule deer. And I crawl up a little further. These deer have no idea we're there. I lift up and I range and I get that buck at 71 yards and he's broadside. So I look at Dad. My dad's below me, trying to film. Granted, he had it autofocus. So the whole time he thought he was filming deer, he was actually filming the grass, 2 feet in front of him. So you can only just see blurs in the background of what these deer are, which kind of sucks. But I almost knew that going into the trip that, he was going to struggle filming. What I didn't realize is now that my dad's old, he needs reading glasses or he can't see the first 2 feet in front of his face. Well, you can't film when the camera screen is literally a foot in front of your face. So he's looking at the screen and he can't see anything. It's just blurry to him. So whatever. So I ended up grabbing the camera, put it manual focus, handed it back to him. I didn't quite have it set right. So at this point, I'm like, all right, we got 20 minutes of shooting light. The wind had calmed down. Like it's quiet. None of these deer are on edge. I'm assuming they're going to feed closer because I'm like, I'm not shooting 71. I want to shoot this deer at 60, which it was more than possible if they would have kept feeding on the same route. And I'm like, it's the first day. I don't need to shoot at 70. I'm not comfortable. I'm not trying to force or rush a shot. So I'm playing this out. This is where I don't know quite, the legitimate backstory to this. So I took out my phone and started filming and I lifted it above the grass so I could get a Snapchat of it and pulled it back down, looked at the video, saved it. And then I pulled up my binocs and looked and that deer had us like kind of pinned, like he was sitting there staring. And he stopped and stared kind of facing us for like 10 minutes, didn't move. All the other deer behind him had no idea. The big buck sat there and stared. But at the same time I lifted up my phone, there had been some turkeys somewhere behind us that started putting. And if you don't know what a turkey putt is, it's kind of like if a turkey sees you, like, and they get spooked off, it's almost the equivalent of a deer blowing. Turkeys will sit there and putt and go, like, buck, 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 like a chicken plucking or a chicken pecking. So I don't know if that deer heard it and was kind of signal like, okay, something's weird, or maybe if he saw a movement from me lifting up my phone through the grass. But regardless, the deer was kind of on edge. After about 10 minutes, the smaller of the 2 giant bucks started walking up the ridge that Dad and I were sitting on. Like if we would have stayed there, he'd have walked within 5-10 yards of us, theoretically. Then the smaller buck followed him. This is where we started filming. I got the footage if you guys want to check out my socials. This is where those deer are getting filmed. And then that big buck, he didn't spook. He just slowly walked up the hill, the same way the other deer went. I watched him kind of disappear on the horizon. It was one of those. I wasn't super mad because I'm like, awesome. Like these deer are here. It's opening night. Like I have all week to sit on these deer and hunt these deer and get closer. Next morning, we go out to the same cut set up. There's a bunch of deer, the same spot we left them last night, but the 2 bucks aren't there. So we start looking around and further up that cut, and I ranged them at 500 yards. Those 2 bucks were sitting there in the wide open. However, there was another patch of sage that was more open, but it was in a spot that was unstockable, like because of the terrain, like you probably couldn't get within 80 to 100 yards of where they were at. We watched them bed down, and I'm like, okay, this is still perfect. We need to watch these deer, make sure, they stay there bedded after the sun comes up, and then we can plan a route to get close. Once we get close, then we can, take all the time in the world. If it takes me 4 hours to belly crawl, a couple feet at a time or a couple feet a minute, I'll do that to get after these deer. So we sat and glassed them for another 30 minutes. The sun came out. The 1 buck actually stood up, and I'm like, okay, they're going to leave. Well, he crawled into the sage and the shade and sat back down. So then I started like, okay, what's a route I can glass? I'm trying to glass a route so I can make a move, cut the 500 yards towards these deer. What's the best route I can take? Well, I'm glassing this route. I look at my binoculars and I see a freaking coyote. And the coyote's kind of like in stalk position and he's facing the deer. And I'm like, oh no, that can't be good. So I move my binoculars from left to right. I'm looking at the coyote. I turn it to the right to look at the deer. Both of those bucks are up on their feet next to each other, staring at the coyote. I look back at the coyote takes off towards these bucks. Move my binoculars back to the bucks, and there they are. It's called stotting. You know how they do like a mule deer prairie bounce type thing? There they were, stotting over the horizon, up further away, and the coyote ended up doing a big loop around. He didn't continue to chase them. So I watched the coyote go off. I'm like, crap. So those deer went over the hill. I never saw them after they went over the hill. So now I'm looking on Onyx, like, where did they go? Because I know they're going to bed down somewhere up there. And I'm like, okay, there's like 8 different patches of sage up there in a mix of 3 different cuts. So it kind of turns into a labyrinth of like, where could these deer have gone? So Dad and I go back and park by camp. It was about 3/4. It was probably almost a mile walk to get to a vantage point where we could glass that stuff. We went slow and steady. We kind of crept over and then we were glassing for a couple hours. I'm like, I had no idea where these deer are. Like they could be here, they could be there. We just need to sit and wait for them to stand up. We waited, it started getting hot. I was getting impatient. Dad was really getting impatient. So then we start talking. I'm like, well, again, we're either going to sit here all day because I don't think these deer are going to move with the heat during daylight to try and find these deer and then potentially take the chance that when they get up, we're in a bad spot where we can't make a move, or we again wait till we can find those deer later tonight and go from there. So we opted to back out, try and find those deer later again that night. And starting that morning, which would be Saturday morning, I woke up with a sore throat and figured it was just dry because you're out in 30% humidity. There's a bunch of different plants, sage. I thought it was just allergies. After we left from that glassing session, my eyes started watering. We're dry. We're getting red. And I'm like, okay, like I have bad allergies. I've never even taken a Benadryl before that I know of in my life. We went to the gas station. I got some Benadryl and some Claritin. Took those. Now it's evening time to go for the evening hunt. And I'm like, my allergies have gotten worse. Like it's like unmanageable. Felt like I was dying. That and being a little bit dehydrated. Never really got on those deer again. Didn't find them, but we found another deer that I'm like, okay, we could try and make a stalk on. Tried for like 200 yards, didn't work, whatever. So then we just kind of sat in that cut for the rest of the night, thinking that, okay, if these deer repeat what they did last night, it's almost like an ambush, right? So it's almost like a whitetail hunt where instead of stalking, I'm sitting behind a clump of sage hoping that they pop out within shooting range. We got skunked. Not a single deer came up that draw that night. In fact, we had probably that same coyote come out to us at like 10 yards, and I scared the absolute shit out of that coyote. And then it's getting dark, so I'm like, all right, we're done for the night. We'll head back to the truck, take the L. On that walk back, after I stood up, I'm like pulsing migraine. Like I feel like I'm gonna just black out. And like I'm like, the only time I've been this way is when I'm severely dehydrated. Granted, I was drinking water, but now I got a sore throat, allergies, runny nose, and I've got like a migraine. So I'm like, okay, whatever. Like let's just sleep this off. That night, like, dude, I slept like shit Saturday night, just hacking. I started coughing. Woke up Sunday and I felt like death. Like it was for sure. I was running a fever. And at that point, I'm like, all right, I'm going to call this sage sickness because I was still convinced it was allergies, but I'm like, I can't believe it. So there I'm taking Claritin, Benadryl, blah, blah, blah. Didn't really get on. Well, we got on a buck that morning. Dad and I made a quick stalk. Again, couldn't break 100 yards on these deer, and it was a pretty decent buck. It was only a 3-point, but it was a big 3-point. He didn't have any forks. In velvet. Then same story, right? So you don't kill in the first hour and a half. You lose sight of those deer because we ended up spooking them. They ran onto the neighbors. Can't hunt it. It's posted. So same story. Now it's like, all right, we got 7 hours to do nothing, today. And it was a cooler day. I think it was a high of like 73. So it wasn't bad, but it's like either walk the properties to try and spook a deer or, you freaking sleep or something. So we took naps. We bought our fishing licenses, went down to the lake, tried to fish. At this point, like I'm just miserable. Like I'm sitting in a beach chair with a fishing rod, not catching anything because you can't cast to where it's deep enough. So you're kind of just there to kill time. I'm dying. I'm coughing, all this shit. Sunday night, We sat there at a public spot and glassed a mule deer buck that I didn't want to go after. Like, we watched this deer, and it's now 8 o'clock. It's starting to get like shooting hours now, just before 9 o'clock, like 8:50 something. Deer's at 770 yards away. There's a couple of them, a small buck for sure, a doe, and then this buck that Dad and I are glassing. And he's like, "Oh, we should go after it." I'm like, "No, that's not the size deer I want to shoot." But again, I'm looking from 700 yards away. The deer stands up finally at like 8:25 and starts walking, and he turns his head, looks at me. I'm like, "Actually, I was wrong. That's probably a deer we should have stalked after." So mind you, I just wasted 25 minutes being a dumbass, being like, "It's not big enough from this far away. I don't want to waste my time going in there." Plus, I don't have a lot of energy. I'm feeling like shit. I didn't want to make that far of a walk right now. That deer stands up, and I'm like, "Shit, we should have left the truck 25 minutes ago," type deal. So we bust ass back there. Like, we're freaking, the terrain is awesome for us to get back there. Booted out a couple whitetails. I'm looking on Onyx, and I'm like, I set a pin where I thought those deer were. And we're now navigating in like a creek bottom, super thick trees and sage, and somehow managed to pop out on the perfect, like the right ridge, right where those deer are. I pop up. I look through my binoculars. I see this deer. He's at like 100 yards. I'm like, "Oh shit, like, we're here." So crawl a little bit further forward. I look up and I see, antlers, and I can't range it because the grass is telling me like, 8 yards or whatever. I know that deer is between 80 and 100 still. So we kind of army crawl a little bit, and I sit in the grass, and all of a sudden, like, I look to my left, and coming on the side hill through the grass, I see antlers. And I'm like, "Shit, Dad, here he is. Get ready." So I got my arrow knocked, I'm hooked up with my release, but I didn't pull back. So I popped up to look up. Well, it's a freaking fork buck, that's at like 40 yards. And he sees me, gets me pinned, blows once, and freaking hops off and kind of stands there at like 70 yards staring at me. I'm like, "Shit." So that deer he ends up walking off. Like, we alerted him, but we didn't completely spook him. He was a young deer. This is probably stupid. So at this point, I kind of stand up, and I'm trying to glass where the other buck is. Can't find it. So I'm like, all right, let's cut down a little. Let's drop 10 feet in elevation, try to really close some distance where we last saw that buck, and pop up, and hopefully he's within shooting distance, because we're losing daylight. We're down to like 10 minutes left of legal light. No. We do that. The only problem is there's no wind at this point. In the sage, everything out there is fucking dead. In like, you would have had to have tiptoed in socks to be quiet. So we're walking. Dad's got, there's two of us, grass tall, everything's crunchy, like, we're making noise. I'm like, "Oh, there's no way we're going to do this." So I cut another 40-50 yards closer, and I'm like, "It's go time. Like, let's pop over the hill." I slowly crawl over the hill. I look up, and all of a sudden, on the opposite hill from us, kind of where that fork buck spooked to, there's 4 bucks all of a sudden, 2 of which they're not 180s, but they're 150 plus Magnum shooters. And I'm like, "Oh shit, like, Dad, there's deer there." He's like, "Oh, I see them. Let's go." There was a sage bush in between me and the deer. So I ranged the deer. They were at 100 yards. Story of my life. Deer at 100 yards out of range. I ranged the sage bush, and it says 30 yards. So I'm like, doing the math. If I can get right behind the sage bush, I can pop up and potentially shoot these deer at 70 yards. At this point, like, I think I had enough adrenaline. I no longer felt sick. I didn't think about feeling sick, but I'm like, I'm going to take the shot. I didn't take the shot the first night. I should have. It was in my mind. Like, I'm not doing a repeat. Like, I'm going to take the shot. Okay. I start crawling to this sage bush. Dad's behind me. I look at him. He's right on my ass. Crawl another 10 yards. I'm about 10 yards from the sage bush, and I don't hear my dad anymore. So I turn around, and he's 10 yards behind me, filming off to my right. And I'm like, shit. So I look to my right, and there's a Magnum fork buck. Like, it was literally just beams in a single time, as a fork buck, but he had the frame of, a 2-year-old deer. Like, it was a decent fork buck staring at me at like 60 yards. I'm not going to shoot this deer because I don't want to shoot a fork buck, even if he's a giant fork buck, staring at me. I'm like, shit. So he hops over and runs towards those other deer. Meanwhile, they're still staring because they can't see me. They just see this other deer's alerted. So I'm like, now let's make or break. Like, these deer are going to take off. So I crawl, get to the sage bush, and I'm like, okay, these deer are going to be 70 yards. I pop up, I see the deer, I go to range them, fucking 101 yards again. They had moved up the hill another 30 yards, and I didn't see it while I was crawling. So I'm like, story of my life, 101 yards. Well, at that point, I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to shoot this fucker. I don't even care. Like, we're going to go for 100 yards here. I stand up, I sat and contemplated because I'm like, mentally I want to, but like, I also know it's unrealistic at this point. Like, I just lost, and now I got to sit.
Yeah, that's a dumb shot to make.
Well, yeah. So it was like one of those where, you'd say, oh, I'm going to take the shot knowing you're not. So I kind of stood there in defeat. I'm watching these deer. They end up kind of, spooking off over the hill, starting away into the sunset. It was kind of like shit movies are made of. Dad didn't get any film because he didn't bring his reading glasses. It had nothing in focus again. I think there's like 2 seconds where you can see these deer. But other than that, it was just another learning moment where I'm like, damn, I seriously thought I was going to close the distance and make the shot. And I popped up and they moved again. And it was another 100 yards away. So I sat there watching them hop off into the sunset. It was beautiful. And it was one of those where I'm like, you know what? I'm okay with losing right now. This was an awesome stock. We did most everything right. The only thing I didn't do right is we maybe could have popped up a different ridge, with the way the wind was and the way it's always hindsight 2020, right? That's why we call this post-hunt clarity. My post-hunt clarity for this whole trip is that I would have done things a little bit differently. That stock in particularly, if I could go back and redo it, I would have headed west another 50, 60 yards to get around into some better cover, get a better angle, because those deer were headed that way anyways. So instead of cutting them off, I tried to shoot straight at them, which was dumb. In hindsight, I'd have done that differently. The other hindsight is I probably should have taken the shot the first night at 71. There was no wind. I wasn't even jittery. Like, I was super calm and collected. And I think a part of that is because I knew I wasn't going to shoot those deer. So the nerve factor was out. But the other hindsight, so after that Sunday night, I go to bed. I couldn't sleep at all that night. I couldn't breathe. I sat in the truck coughing. I almost threw up, like, just miserable. I woke up the next day early and Dad looked at me and he's like, I have a feeling you don't want to be here anymore. I'm like, to be honest, if I'm this sick, like, there's no point in burning the PTO. It's Labor Day. I took off till Friday. I'm like, if I don't feel any better, even in the next 3 days, like, I don't think I can hunt. Like, if there was another 700-yard stock, physically, I don't think I could do it. And if I could do it, I don't know if I'd be able to draw my bow back by the time I got there. So what's the point? So we looked at each other like, you know what? It's hot the rest of the week. It's going to be low to mid 90s. Like, he didn't want to be out there in that. I could tell. Like, he was like, yeah, I kind of miss your mom already. We've been gone for 4 days total. And, he's not used to taking trips like that. So I could tell he didn't want to be out there, but he was going to stick by my decision regardless. So I'm like, you know what? I'll save the PTO. That way I can go back out there when it's cooler in October. Most of the leaves and cover should be gone. So one, it's easier to find deer, easier to see deer all day, and easier to actually, make stocks and have a fun hunt. So we ended up just driving home straight. Actually, he drove 90% of the way. I think I drove for a total of two of the 12 hours it took us to get home. So we had to keep stopping so I could freaking load up on Dayquil and other shit. So, but it was a little bit miserable. You plan a hunt like that, and then you get sick. And, I talk to some people, and of course your buddies razz you, and they're like, oh, dude, you shouldn't have been a little bitch. Like, stick it out and go kill one. And I'm like, I have the option. Like, I got more PTO. I got more time, the rest of the year. I originally planned on going twice, saying that the first trip was just a bonus to go out there. If I don't kill anything, I won't be mad because I'll have another trip. And that's kind of exactly how it planned out. So I'm good that I had that in my mind, and I wasn't just rolling the dice on this is the trip, take it or leave it. Otherwise, it probably would have been flinging some arrows. The other thing that might have been a blessing in disguise. So I got home and started shooting my bow again. And with the Grim Reaper practice head plus my dirt naps, my fixed heads, they were shooting all over the place. Like, the Grim Reaper would be windage good, but it would be literally 8 inches high. Same story I was dealing with earlier. And then my dirt nap would always be high, but it might plane left or it might plane right. And I'm like, something's fucked. Like, I just know this is not me shooting. So I didn't do anything about it until 2 days before Wisconsin bow opener. And I took it to a pro shop. I didn't want to go to Shields, took it to a local guy. And we shot it through paper, and it was tearing knock low, like, repeatedly, like serious knock low. And he's like, yeah, you got a problem. What happened to it? Because I told him it was shooting great last year. I'm like, the only thing that happened is my D-loop was frayed. So I retied on another D-loop, but I'm pretty positive it's in the right spot. And he's like, most guys don't realize it, but your D-loop could move a quarter inch, an eighth inch, or even just a smidge, and it's going to throw your sight off like that. So he adjusted my D loop, just lifted it up. He said he moved it an eighth of an inch, and we started shooting bullet holes. At point blank range, I shot 2 of them. He told me I was good, and I'm like, "You'd care if I shoot it like 10 yards through paper?" He's like, "Oh, I don't know if it'll make a difference, but yeah, go ahead." And I'm like, "Well, it just gives the time arrow to fuck up if it's gonna fuck up type deal." Shot it at the 10 yards, and it pounded a bullet hole. And I'm like, all right, we did some wizardry work. He was all nervous because he thought he was gonna have to put shims and adjust the timing and stuff like that. But it literally came down to that D loop just being in a different spot than how I originally tuned and sighted in that bow. I've been shooting now the last week, and the freaking dirt naps are flying awesome. I shot them out to 40 yards. They were pounded tacks. My groupings are a lot better. I don't have any flyers unless it's me, and I got shaky towards my last round or whatever. Like, I'm shooting great. So I'm more so probably glad I didn't take the shot at 70, because there's a good chance, like, I didn't really practice at 70. I shot a couple arrows at 80 and they'd still be high. And I'm like, oh, it's probably me, but I seriously had a problem with my equipment. In hindsight, 2020, a blessing I didn't shoot at that deer at 71 yards, because I think I'd be feeling a lot worse right now knowing that I either wounded or missed that deer than if I didn't take the shot in general. So, if I can learn anything from this, it's like, honestly, you and I had so many phone calls about it, whether it was form and stuff, and you and I kind of agreed, like, don't change anything unless you're confident. And then I kind of ran out of time, and I'm like, I'm just gonna run with it. And I had an equipment malfunction. So something simple like that. And now I'm glad, because I'm like, I didn't mess anything up. I have, I talked to the landowner's son again. He's like, "You're welcome anytime, come out here." So I'm like, I'll come back in October. So I'm planning on going back October 19th for 8 days. And I don't think I'm going to be super picky. I'm just going to go out there. I'm going to hunt. I'm going to kill myself deer.
You want to share like what you had for lunch today or anything?
That was a long time. I'm looking at the clock, dude. That was like a 25-minute recap. Maybe
that
longer.
Was a 40-minute. I literally introed and then you just started talking for 40 minutes.
Sorry. So that's my North Dakota post-hunt clarity. Let's hop into Ben's Kentucky extravaganza. He's dealing with Yahoo's trail cameras and deer that blow at him.
Yeah, I mean, so I've gotten out to hunt twice now. And the first time, so I started a new job on September 3rd, and season opened on September 7th. So I had to go, my job's based in Wisconsin, but I work remote. But my first week I had to be in the office. So I went up the 3rd, I went up the 2nd, which was Memorial Day or Labor Day. Went up, worked Tuesday through Friday, came back down on Saturday the 7th. Well, it's a 9-hour drive, so I missed opening day. We had a nice cold front come in the 7th and the 8th. It had been like mid 80s, leading up to that. It dropped down and the highs were like 70 and 72 or something like that. So I got to hunt Sunday night. And went in, and I'm like, you know what? I feel like I have a tendency to like sit back too much and just wait. And I don't know if part of that's hunting pub or private land growing up, where it's like, as long as you don't screw it up and overpressure it, like, you'll have your better parts of the season, or where that came from. But I'm like, I'm going to set a goal this year that, like, if I think deer are going to be in a certain area, as long as I have like the right wind and stuff, like, I'm going to get in there and hunt, even if I feel like it's aggressive. So that's what I did in this instance. So I had one spot where I had 2 shooters on camera and maybe like a maybe buck. I got one picture of him like 2 days before season. And so kind of hard to tell, but like a nice buck. And tried to dive in there first night of the year. The access into that spot, or the access route I had planned, just wasn't great because it was super calm and it's been really dry here. So everything's like, even though there's not fresh leaves on the ground, everything is loud. And so you basically have to come down a ridge, get to the bottom, and then come back up this way that I was planning on walking in. And so I'm gonna walk in, I'm kind of making noise, and I busted a deer out of there, but it didn't seem to be too scared. I just saw it get up out of its bed across the ridge and kind of trot off. And I got set up and, felt like other than that, I got in pretty clean, and just kept thinking, okay, last hour light is going to be money, and never saw a deer. And then, so I got out to hunt Friday night as well, which would have been the 13th, and slipped into this
Friday the
spot.
13th.
Yeah, yeah. Basically got out after work, which I work till 5. It's dark at about 8 o'clock, and it's like a half an hour drive to this spot, maybe 35 minutes. So I'm like, okay, I probably don't have time to get like a stand set, so I'm just gonna like bomb in and just find a spot where I can sit on the ground. And I've never had good luck just like sitting on the ground. Like, one, I don't like it as much because I feel like visually like it's just a lot harder. Two, like, I don't know, I've done it a couple times before, and every time I see deer, I feel like I get pinned. Like, no matter where I'm set up at, I don't know why, but I'd never been into this spot other than to scout it, and it's like a bluff or like a big like hill, with kind of like a little bench on it, and then like a steep drop off, or like almost like a ledge there. So the deer either use the bench up top, or they're walking down in this bowl down below. So I figured if I could get up on the ridge, like I'm high enough up above them, they won't see me. And like I found some good cover or whatever. And I'm like, I'd probably be too high up in a stand. So this is a perfect spot to just like ground sit. And the one spot I thought deer wouldn't come from was kind of over like behind my left shoulder, because it's so steep going up that hill that it's just like deer don't have to. There's easier routes to walk. Well, the one deer I saw that night came up and over from behind me, and that's right where my wind was blowing. So she got to like 30 yards or whatever it was. I just saw a flash of the body while it was running away. She busted me, blew once, tore off. That was all I saw. So I definitely need to like make some adjustments. This whole it's a different season for me. I'm not used to this mobile hunting, public land hunting. I had a trail camera
curve.
Yeah, it definitely is, and it's a fun learning curve. I had a trail camera go down on me. So Wednesday, so between my two hunts, I went out to check it, or figure out if it died or what was going on with it. And I found a better access route into that first stand I hunted. Found some good sign and some other spots that might be good to hunt along the way. And I found a couple trail cameras in there. So like where I'm set up is like right on the edge of public and private. And so according to everybody down here, Onyx isn't that accurate, which I don't know if I believe or not, but there's like this old, like, I wouldn't call it a road, but almost like a trail that goes through the woods, like 10 feet inside of where, maybe 15 feet inside of where Onyx says the property line is. And right on what would be the private side of that, or the outside edge, I found two trail cameras. One of them had a phone number on it. So I took a picture of it later that night, texted the guy. It was like, hey, just so you know, like I've had a trail camera set up like 50 yards from you for like the past month now. I just wanted to let you know. That way we can like plan, if you're going in there one day, like just let me know. And, if you tell me first, I'll stay out of there, or vice versa. If I text you early in the week and say I'm going in there Saturday, like stay out of there. And he's like, so he texts me back. He's like, I'm actually hunting the private side. Like, I hunt quite a bit, but like you're totally good. Like I don't think we'll run into each other that much. Just so you know, here's where the property line actually is. The property line's that old road. Yada yada yada, whatever. So learn some good information there. Obviously text him like, what have you been seeing on your cams, whatever. And he said not much, which like I don't know if that's everybody's true or answer. Not. Yeah. He seemed like an older guy and seemed very genuine. Like he was really happy that I texted him and reached out and like was really willing to give me like pointers. Like he said, not in his year, he's hunted this piece of property for like 15 years. Like they're family members of his. He's never seen that many hunters on this public piece. So that was good to learn. But before that, I'd seen both the trail cameras. The guy's got a ladder stand right on where Onyx says the property line is. So I'm like, shit. I'm like, there's two trail cameras down in here, a ladder stand. I'm like, obviously there's more pressure in this spot than I thought. So after I got my trail camera all set up, I'm like, what do I do? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go knock on this guy's door, see if I can get permission So I knock on his door. It's like one of those where you wait long enough where you're like, maybe nobody's home. And then all of a sudden I see a flash movement inside. So he comes to the door, old guy, probably in his 70s, like, hey, here's my story. Just moved down here. Like, I'm from Wisconsin, looking for some private land to be able to hunt. Just curious if you're a hunter or if you ever allow people to hunt. Nope, we save our hunting permission for all our family members, yada, yada, yada. Okay, thank you. Appreciate your time. Yep, thanks for stopping. I'm like, shit. So I drive around for a little while, like, and I'm just like across from this private, there's a bean field, and it's the only bean. Like I've driven all around this. It's the only bean field around. There's some cornfields around, but um, there's just not any beans. And it's a huge field. Like it's where I'd expect the deer to be. And at this point, it's like 7:30 at night, or like 7, I think. And dark's like 8:15. So I'm like, there should be like a deer out in this field with as big as it is.
Yep.
There's nothing. I'm driving all around. I'm seeing these cornfields, these open pastures. I'm not seeing deer. So I was gonna knock on a couple more doors, and I decided not to because they were like big, like chunks of land with like, it might be owned by, there might be a chunk here, chunk there, and they're all owned by the same guy, but there's 3 different houses on each one. So I'm like, I don't know which one's the person's house, which one's like, maybe somebody they rent to or whatever. So I went down, and there's in the corner of this piece, it butts up to of this public piece that I've been hunting, it butts up to a cornfield. And it's like a 10-acre field. And I'm like, if I can just get permission to like hunt this side of the field, like, I'm hunting the same deer as I would be on public, but I can hunt them in a way the other people can't. I can at least like be out on the field edge and stuff. And so I go to the guy's house. He's out in the driveway. Big, like huge, like probably 50-year-old blue collar dude, just like your typical like 50-year-old blue collar guy, huge hands, like just big dude. And I pull in, he's kind of looking at me funny. And so go up, give him my same spiel. I'm Ben. I'm from Wisconsin. He's like, I was wondering, I saw the plates. Like yeah, I just moved down here. Curious if I can just hunt your 10 acres over here. Super nice guy, like super helpful, like trying to tell me he's like, well, have you checked out the public over here? And like what a lot of people don't realize is like that don't hunt, like this guy doesn't hunt, is like, yeah, there's public over there, but the reason I'm asking you to hunt is because I don't want to have to hunt just the public. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like it's like I don't know where to hunt. It's like I'm trying to get land that only I hunt. And so anyways, he was super helpful. He's like, my dad and his wife hunt it. I want to save it for them.
Sure.
Whatever. So struck out on 2. Not really sure but after that is when I texted the guy. So I started feeling better about it because I'm like, okay, the only like deer hunter sign I've seen on this piece is actually a guy that's hunting the private land. But yeah, definitely gonna have to make some switches. I think might try and sneak out after work tomorrow. Probably the last time we've had like a really hot snap again. It's been
same. We're in the same thing. It's in the mid 80s here all week. So
yeah, it's like upper 80s, even into the 90s this weekend. And tomorrow's hot, but it's only 82, whereas today was like 88. And then Wednesday's only 84, but then by Thursday it's back up to 87. And tomorrow's overcast as well. So I might try and sneak out and hunt. It's just hard because like I said, I don't really like hunting from the ground. By the time I get done with work, drive half an hour to any of these three pieces are between 30 and 35 minutes. Hang a set. It's like I might only have an hour and 40 minutes to sit, but
it might be fine. I still think you should sit closer to I'd sit closer to the truck. Get somewhere that you only have to walk in. It takes you 5 minutes to get in. Set up 8 feet off the ground just so you have a better vantage point and try something different. Maybe, I don't know.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. So when I went to check my camera the other day, probably let me look at next year. I mean, as the crow flies, it's probably 200 yards from the truck. Yeah, 180 yards from the truck. I found this. There's like an open field to my left. There's a bunch of dove fields on this piece, so they've got everything mowed down. But this is like a grass field that they left, and you can see it's like this small narrow strip. Like I'll show you. Obviously the viewers won't be able to see it, but like they left the grass up in it. And there's like, you can see deer trails going in and out of it. And then when you go back into the woods, like so I walked all the way down it to the far end and went into the woods because that's the way I wanted to try to access into my stand. There's some deer trails that wind through there and it's pretty thick, but there's like open pockets where it's like you might have like a 10-yard opening or like a 10 by 10 little opening. So I'm thinking I found this monster scrape, like what you were talking about, where it's like a car hood.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm thinking like I won't be able to see a ton, but I might just go in. Like it'll probably take me 10 minutes to get there tomorrow, even if I'm going slow and being quiet, and probably another 10 minutes to set up. Like, and the wind's perfect for it. Like maybe I'll just go set up right over that, and it's one of those spots where it's like you're either gonna see nothing or you're going to see a shooter, probably, like, is my guess. You know, like you might sit there 10 times and 9.
I would have moved your trail camera over the scrape.
I should have, but I've had 3, like I said, 3 good bucks on that cam. So, but yeah, I maybe should have. So that's kind of the boat I'm in right now. It's a different year for me. You know, I haven't had the opportunity to shoot nearly as much. Like if I can fling like 10 arrows a week right now, like I'm pretty happy with that. Like basically enough to just kind of stay with it is what I'm looking for right now. But part of that too, I think sometimes the more you shoot, the more you can overthink, because it's like, yeah, if you pound 100 arrows a week, you're bound to have a couple bad ones. Where it's like if you shoot 10 arrows a week and you just make sure they're all good quality reps, like yeah, you're probably a little under practiced, but like if all 10 of them are good, like you got nothing really to overthink about. So I tried to shoot a bunch before I left this summer. I tried to shoot, every day that I was home a couple weeks ago. And now I'm just like trying to just shoot enough that I'm like, okay, out to 40 yards, I'm super confident, and beyond that, it doesn't matter. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I've never been an early season guy. I told you, like I've just never had luck with it. And I don't know if it's partially that, like, you're almost hunting tentatively for me early season. Cause I'm like, well, I know if I'm not aggressive now and I just wait until it's better to get aggressive, like that's when the deer are going to be moving. Whereas like if I blow stuff out on private land early season, it becomes a lot more difficult, So I don't know if that's part of the reason, and I need to just get over that mental hurdle, or what the scoop there is. But yeah, I've just never had good luck with it. Last year was the closest I'd say I had to luck with early season, and I had a shooter at a maybe shooter at like 55 yards.
Yeah, and I think you'll probably, like, I still think this year's going to be so beneficial for you. I think it's going to make you a better hunter. It's just going to improve woodsmanship, and you're going to just find out, things that you never would have thought about, hunting the way we've hunted here in Wisconsin. I'm just early season right now for me in Wisconsin. Like, I honestly think if I went out, like, I didn't necessarily hunt. I filmed my buddy Kyler trying to get him a deer, because all the deer I have on camera, I don't care to shoot. And I think if it was me just hunting, like if I had this full weekend, I'm filming a wedding this coming Saturday, so I'm not going to get out and hunt. I seriously know, like, I could fill a tag. I'm not saying I'm going to kill a deer I want to kill, but I can fill a tag. And that just comes from early season. Deer are not moving very far. Deer are not, like, where you find the sign is it's so much easier to kill and predict deer, coming to a spot if you find the sign. And that's, I just moved a trail camera. Him and I got done sitting Saturday morning, and I'm like, this one camera that you and I put out actually wasn't getting hardly any deer pictures. So I went to pull it. Well, on the way in, like 70 yards from the camera, I found a rub line of all fresh, like 10 rubs in a row. It's like one of the biggest rubs, or tallest rubs, I should say, I've ever seen. So I moved my camera towards that rub, made a mock scrape, and that next morning, him and I went to go sit, and I'm like, I think we should go sit the rub line. Like, I seriously, with that fresh a sign, the peelings are still on the ground, that many rubs, like the buck, even if those are only 3-4 days old, he's in the area and he's using that spot. Well, I talked to Kyler about it, and he's like, well, honestly, we saw some deer out of the preset stand. Let's just go back and sit there. And I'm kind of like, you know what? He's not wrong, because, it's less work for us to haul in the stands and the gear. Like, I'm fine with it. That's where you want to go. Let's go sit there. him and I were sitting in the stand, and at 7:40, we hadn't seen a single deer yet. The woods over by us was dead, and we were kicking ourselves like, oh, they're just not moving today. Get a trail cam notification from that other trail camera, and a nice 10-point with a split G2 was in there at 7:40 for like 5 pictures. And I'm like, yeah, you'd have killed a deer if we'd have sat in the other spot. So just one of those things. And it's, I just know I could go kill a deer this next weekend if I wanted to. The problem is I'm not seeing deer that I care to shoot. And that's, partially because I've shot, quite a few deer in the 130 range caliber, and I have a booner on the wall, and it really flaws your expectations a little bit. But it's one of those, yeah, and I'm like not super apt because I got, mule deer hunt, I got a Kansas tag, and Wisconsin to me is a bonus. I want to fill the tag because I haven't in 7 years or however long it's been with my bow tag. But at the same time, as much as I say that, I'm talking over this podcast, I want to shoot a buck. I know it'll happen. I'll get 10-inch deer in front of me this year, and I'm going to let it walk. It's just doesn't do it for me. But that's where the rut comes into play, right? So early season for me is all calculated. It's super methodical. You're looking at fresh sign, you're narrowing bedding, you're looking at water sources, food sources, all that stuff comes into play. And I think that's where I've lacked. When I tell you, if I have a tag in my pocket after October 20th, it gets burned, typically, because the rut is just honestly super random. And I've never been in a good rut spot where you're seeing deer flying, running around. Typically my October or November hunts, it's all or nothing. I'm either seeing deer or I'll sit, I've had so many sits on November 2nd and 3rd, that kind of week where I'm I sit dark, and I don't see a goddamn deer. And it's frustrating because other guys are oh, there's bucks running all over. It's awesome. And, maybe it's just the public land I've hunted, or maybe it's, just
even
me
in Northwest Wisconsin, my luck has always started more closer to the 4th or 5th.
Sure.
I've just never seen that. Everybody says it's oh, you get to Halloween or the 1st of November and you can just feel that magic in the air. And mine has always started closer to that end of the first week in November. Best rut day, even in Northwest Wisconsin, best rut day I've ever had in my life anywhere was November 12th.
Sure.
I remember the year you and I started hanging out a lot when I shot that buck that I never found. I sat pretty much dark to dark the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of November and was barely seeing deer. And then all of a sudden the 4th, it blew up. I don't know, those first couple days in November have just I've never seen the rut really kick in.
It could be the spots I choose to sit too. And that's where I say I'm looking at the rubs and trying to hunt active scrapes, and it's I'll sit there for a full day, not see anything. I'm all right, write the spot off. When the next day, who knows, maybe it's lit up in there. It just depends where the does are at and what's going on. But this year I'm going to try and give it some more time. Granted, it's I'm in a different place most of November. So that's why I'm either killing a deer in October this year in Wisconsin, or it's probably not going to get killed until December, which is fine. I've honestly had really good luck late season. It just depends if there's ice on the lake or not, because I feel after gun season I kind of lose that itch living where I live, and it's if there's 3 inches of ice on the lake, I might donate my Saturday to go try and get some panfish and crappies, and I will.
It's hard
10 degrees
it's hard to get fired up about late season in Wisconsin. I feel
if I had a deer I was actively pursuing and was excited to kill, yes. If I'm in the same, that's why I'm saying early season. If I go out to hunt, it's just for a chance that something that I haven't had on trail camera walks by me and I shoot it, and I get surprised. In late season, it's honestly the same thing. If I have a good deer showing up on camera, it's all right, I'm excited to go sit. The same thing last year, after gun season, it's okay, I got 2-year-olds on camera. I really don't care to shoot it, and I haven't seen anything else. So I'm why waste the sit if this buck's going to come out and I know I'm not going to shoot it? So
yeah, and that's for me. It's hard to know right now because I kind of feel the same. I've got some bucks I would no doubt shoot on camera right now, but they've kind of disappeared over the last couple of weeks. But I don't want to say so much ground to hunt because it's really only 1,800 acres, but that's a lot of land. And I've got 3 trail cameras out. So it's what's out there that I'm not getting pictures of.
And there's probably a bunch, that's out there that you're not
I've got one piece that I don't even have a camera on. I probably should. I should probably go pull one of mine. I should go pull one of the ones from the piece that I have 2 cameras on especially because I'm not getting many pictures on it, and move it to that piece. But like, I don't know.
It's also a time thing, right? So it's like if you're gonna move a camera, guess what? You gotta go on the weekend. So it's like you almost have to go bust in a Saturday morning. You don't necessarily want to hunt and go hunt just to like your main goal is like, okay, I'm probably not gonna kill anything, but I'm here because I need to pull that camera and move it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things you just have to outweigh and go from there.
Yeah. But I mean, like I said, it's just been weird. Like it's been so hot here, which I was not expecting. This weekend's back into the 90s. So like I'll probably hunt tomorrow, and then I probably won't hunt until the weekend of the 28th, 29th. Honestly, like finally then it's the 29th is supposed to be back to 79.
You know what you should do? You should go buy a shotgun and get your dove license and just go up there and wreak havoc on some doves.
Dude, I got to the parking lot the other day to go fix that camera, and I'm like, this is part of one of the other reasons I was like getting a little freaked out is I get there and there's a car in the they have like a gravel parking lot with a gate. And all summer when I was scouting or all of August, the gate was shut. And all of a sudden I got there the first night to hunt. They had the gate open with a sign that said parking up there because this piece has dove fields on it. So they let you park in one of the fields. So in the actual parking lot, the gravel parking lot, there's a car. And I'm assuming that was probably a bow hunter because they had a Michigan plate. Probably just somebody coming to get like an early season trip in.
Yep.
And then up in front, there's 4 vehicles like up in the field parking lot. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, how many people are hunting this? It's a Wednesday afternoon. Like, I didn't even expect anybody to be here. I just came after work to get my camera fixed. And fortunately, I think they were all dove hunters, all those 4 vehicles. But
sure.
That made me feel a little because once I got out of my truck, I could see them getting out of theirs and they're grabbing their shotguns and stuff. But yeah, it's been an interesting experience so far. But
well, hopefully the next time we talk, we have some more stuff to talk about. We try and get a guest on here for you guys soon. I know we haven't done that yet. We're now 14 episodes in, I think 13 or 14 episodes in.
And I know what I was gonna say. That like you were talking about going hunting with Kyler, like that's the piece of hunting I'm kind of missing right now. Like
some camaraderie with it.
Yeah, like you and I were to the point last year where we were starting to hunt together some, and then I tagged out in Wisconsin, and then like I remember like in high school it was like that opening day, you'd go stay at a buddy's, and you guys would get up and go hunt. You might be in different stands, but you'd go hunt together that first weekend, whatever, and like it's weird. I don't have that. Not that. I mean, for a few years, like not every year did I do that for postseason, but like it'd be nice to have somebody to do that with.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Because honestly, if he didn't come up and ask, because he wanted to go to Minnesota first, and I kind of told him, I'm not in a position. I don't necessarily want to buy the tag right now, but I'm like, if you want to come up, I got some smaller bucks on camera. I don't know what you're looking to shoot. He's like, I'm only going to be able to hunt a couple weekends this year. I'm going to shoot the first buck that walks out. I'm like, boy, do I have the spot for you. He comes up, and I mean, if he wouldn't have came up, I honestly don't think I would have been in the woods this weekend. I think I would have just, taken another weekend to hang out. And
it keeps it fun and entertaining, and it's like it's not only fun to go hunt, but then it's fun for you guys to get to bullshit about it afterwards, and like you're driving to and from the spots together and bullshitting, and it's enjoyable. It's fun when you've got somebody else that's into it that you can go with.
Yeah, and it's one of those things you don't like, in your position right now, like you almost don't understand it till it's gone. Like we used to do it all the time. It's just you're accustomed to it. Like, yeah, you go hunt with some buddies, and then you're out by yourself, and it's like shit. Like it's literally just me in the woods, and I'm out here to kill, and that's honestly it. So
yeah, well, and I've made some friends down here. Like I've met a couple guys that I've actually hung out with like quite a bit, but they're not hunters. They've never hunted before, and they've both expressed an interest in me taking them. And I'm like, that'd be like, on one hand, that's super cool. Like you get to introduce somebody new to it, and like that's what it's all about. But on the other hand, there's that little bit in you that's like, oh, are they going to be a bot? Like, is this pretty much just a good sit because they're going to be loud,
slow you down,
fidgety, but I mean, like I said, that is what it's all about too, is introducing new people to it. And who knows? Maybe they get into it and they've got, a
Some
grandparent that
land,
has 80 acres that they want to invite you to hunt next year because they want to hunt or what, who knows how that goes. So
yeah, that could
you got to
that could
keep
be a
your options
benefit.
open. But
Well, hopefully you just learn some things. Next couple weeks as we reconvene on some hunts that either worked out or didn't work out. We can look back at these and kind of talk some more strategy. And really, that's the whole point of Post Hunt Clarity, right? We like to sit there and tell our story about how we fucked up, how we were successful, and things we
yeah,
could do different next time. So
yeah, it's just so much of a grind right now.
yeah, and
But
it's not
it's going to make it
necessarily.
so much more rewarding when I kill a deer.
No, absolutely.
You know,
And then you got to realize like, oh shit, I got to pack this thing up.
yeah, that's going to be fun, but we'll get it figured out.
That's right.
You
Well, I
know,
appreciate everybody tuning in. That's all she wrote for this episode. If you guys want, I got some more YouTube videos posted, rebranded the Beagle Boy Outdoor channels to Hunting with Tourette's. I'm now embracing my chemical imbalance in my brain. So when people see me cuss uncontrollably, which I don't really do, or Twitch look like a bobblehead, all that shit, all that good stuff is on YouTube and my other social media. So check it out. Otherwise, Ben and I will see you next time on another episode of Post Hunt Clarity.
you can check out BC Squared Outdoors too on Instagram and TikTok.
Oh yeah, he's doing the Lord's work, posting all my nested stuff. So go check him out and go check out his nested system that he stealth stripped the absolute shit out of. I actually did
Dude,
that.
it's
By the way.
fine.
I did the same.
It's
thing. Yeah,
fine.
no, I did the same thing. And I'm
It
like,
helps
wow,
a
this
ton.
is a moneymaker.
It's one of those things that it's like, yeah, you spend a little bit of money on the stealth strips. Yeah, you spend a little bit of time doing it. But if it can make you quieter, like if it makes you have to think about it less and it reduces your noise a little bit, like it's worth it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
if last thing you want is metal pinging on metal. And what I always think about is like how many times maybe you didn't spook a deer or like you don't think you spooked a deer. Maybe you make a loud noise or you break a stick or your metal tings together or whatever, but 200 yards away a deer was up on its feet and heard that and was maybe going to come that way, and it kind of freaked him out and they just turned and walked the other direction. And you never knew that they would have come that way. You never knew that you did scare them, but you did scare them. That's what I think
Interesting
about all the time.
perspective. And no, it's dotting your I's and crossing your T's. So
Yeah. So, all right, we'll wrap it up. That's all I got.
see you guys.